All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Why Not Us podcast. My good-looking gentleman friend over there, Michael McGowan. My name is Carter Kramer. Yeah, we're doing the distance thing today. We got the long distance relationship going. It's a hard thing sometimes.
But we manage it well, buddy. We do.
I don't know. I miss your vibe. I miss your energy. It's so magnetic.
Well, it's interesting because I'm. Yeah, that's one word for it, magnetic.
I'm
sitting on your side of the table, so I feel a little weird here.
Really?
It's like sleeping on the opposite side of the bed.
Jimmy let you sit on my side.
He did. I don't know.
I feel tainted.
I got promoted.
Oh God, demoted. I think is
maybe.
Oh gosh. Hey, listen, we got to tell a quick story before we get into this because this is a serious topic, and I'm excited to get into it. But we got to tell this. We got to tell this story about Lily.
Oh God, really?
So I had to send. I'm going to take credit for it. I had to send Mike a gift based on a little drive that we took in Iowa. And for those of you that are here locally and will understand exactly what I'm talking about, there's a place in tiny little town called Buck Creek, Iowa, which I'm not really sure if it's like an incorporated town or not, but there happens to be a small meadow filled with llamas.
So we're doing this, we're dropping along, and I see these llamas because we're going heading out to one of your farms, right?
Yeah.
We're doing the farm and I see all these llamas, and I go, "Hey, are those llamas?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, sure." I go, "Huh."
There was there was like a long pond. There was like a long pause in there. You're like, "Huh." So anyway, this llama thing's been going on. So made the decision to hop on Amazon and send Mike a very large stuffed llama. Mm-hmm. Which I feel has actually comforted you some.
Well, which I named her. I've named her Lily the llama.
Yeah,
FYI.
Yes, and it's a good looking thing.
It's a pillow, and it's I put it between my knees, and it's great to like you put a pillow between your knees. I put it between my knees. And Lily's great. I mean, she's amazing.
I bet she is. I don't know that we should get into the whole story, Mike. Anyway.
I mean, you can. If you use your imaginations, you're probably right.
The funny thing is, man, I'm not. Llamas are spitters. I'm more into the swallowing part. Sorry.
Oh God, here we go.
Okay. We haven't done this in a while. I'm going to get all of our bad jokes out of the way. Okay, so let's talk about this, man, because this came up in. So we did a podcast that was talking about the COVID situation, about Dr. Fauci. I believe it was about Dr. Fauci's interview with the Oversight Committee, right?
Yep.
And I think I made a comment, and you kind of echoed in on a discussion about how. And it was interesting, man, because I didn't know much about it, but I had heard, kind of through the rumor mill and people that I know that have been in the service in some level, yourself included, that there had been some kind of, I would call kind of experimental usage of different vaccines and shots and, different stuff on service members. And so that got pulled out of one of our podcasts as a short, and it like blew up. There was like a bunch of comments.
Over 9,000 views and like
immediately.
It was like 24 comments. Yeah, at least.
Yeah. I thought I saw 30 comments or so. Yeah. It was crazy, right? And it happened really quick. So, and a lot of the comments happened to be from people going like, "Oh yeah, I got this, I got that.
I myself, or I knew someone, or I know someone now who's now 55 years old and has lasting effects of what they took or had 30 years ago, or whatever the case might be." So yeah,
right. So here's kind of the preface for today, and the hope for today is to dive into this further. Being the madman that you are, you got into some in-depth research and discovered that a lot of this is indeed not only true but documented on different levels. And there's also some tiebacks to some other things I think that we've talked about as it relates to larger companies' involvement and some of these government entities, and kind of how those things are there's not necessarily a really hard line, right, Mike, between these privatized companies and our federal government's, bodies. And
Yep.
I think there's some connections there that we need to talk about. So anyway, why don't you kind of talk a little bit, man, about just kind of how you got into this, where you found some of the information and what you discovered. And honestly, dude, I want to hear about your own experience as well, because obviously you can talk about some of this firsthand.
Yeah. So the first thing I did was I had a question in my head, right? I was, can the government, can the military, mandate that service members take certain vaccines, drugs, shots, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I looked it up. Absent FDA approval or a presidential waiver, the DoD may never implement a requirement that service members take the vaccine regardless of consent. History has shown that the DoD lacks the legal authority to do so, and a federal court will likely grant an injunction to stop such a policy. Right. So right then and right there, you see, and this is from the legal side of things, that the DoD cannot mandate. Right. So now, everybody's head right now, in recent history, is going to the COVID-19 vaccine and service members being forced out, right, of the military because they wouldn't take it.
Yes, as they were in a lot of privatized companies as well, right? It was like, hey, you either take this or you can walk, which is really strange because, again, you and I talked about this. I mean, that is not. I don't know, man. That's I think the forceful push of that situation is one of the things that, like, for me personally, made me really nervous about it. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, why, like, wait, you're going to tell me I have to do this, or I can't go places, or I can't travel, or I can't,
right?
Like, what? And again, like, and again, how easy? I mean, do people even really know if I, if I had it or not? I don't know. I just thought it was very strange. It was very forceful.
And it goes on to say, so if the court would grant an injunction, right, that means that military members could technically sue the government for forcing them to take shots. So it also says, while the federal government, would attempt to hide behind the Ferris Doctrine, which I didn't look up, but anytime it is sued, the court has definitely found appropriate standing and jurisdiction and likely grants injunctive relief, forcing the DoD to stop. Right. So this is saying that, in a lot of those cases, and I haven't found any evidence of service members suing the government over the COVID-19 vaccine. I haven't found any. There's probably some out there. I'm sure there are, but I haven't found any.
Yeah.
And so, but if someone did, the court would likely grant an injunction. Now, I don't know, but with the politics of all of it and everything that was going on, in 2020, 2021, I don't know how that would have played out. But this legal statements, these scholars and what's happened in the courts in the past, you think about Vietnam, you think about Iraq war, you think about all of those things. They've granted injunctions. They've said, no, you can't. You have to stop. Right. So it tells me that how many ever years later, 30 years later, 20 years later, whatever the case might be, they should have, some service members, if they had sued or if they said no, the court would have sided with them.
Right. Right.
So
as they should.
Yeah.
Right. Don't you agree? I mean, as they should. I mean, this is one of those things, man, where, I do not think that it is fair to think of our service members who are, and again, there's a lot of different circumstances for why people enter the military branches of the United States. But, to take advantage, to take blatant advantage of those people because you have them in a captive audience scenario, in any way, shape, or form, especially this one where you don't know what the potential issues could be. I mean, so talk about some of these. Talk about some of these shots aside from COVID, because there was a lot of things that, and you had, I think, direct experience with some, correct?
Yeah. Well, so it's an order. If you're given an order,
right,
to take a shot, you're given an order. You have to follow your order, or you could be disciplined for it. So,
dude, it reminds me of like one of those like porn sites, like Free Use MILF or something. It's like, just do what you're told or else.
Well, that was
your face.
That was a sharp left turn right there. So anyway,
that's an order. All right, anyway,
that's an order. Back to the topic at hand. This all started with
Anyway.
This all started with Pelosi's cans.
I'm like,
What-
dude, I'm flushed. I'm flushed because that was really poor choice.
What?
I just called myself out really bad.
You should. Once we went down the Pelosi's cans route, yeah, it's all downhill from there. I mean, what's that happen? But okay. So back to the topic. So remember what I said at the very beginning.
Yes.
Absent FDA approval or a presidential waiver. So the legal, the legal side of things that it says the current president, and this was an article written in 2021, will likely grant waivers. So that gives the DoD the right to do whatever they want, right? Because I know, but this goes back to what you said in that Fauci podcast that we did, right? The COVID podcast, the testimony podcast, where you said, how did this switch from a healthcare issue to a political issue? Right?
Right. Yes. Yep.
So I, this isn't the first time that service members have endured, if you will, or been subject to experimental vaccinations or vaccinations maybe they didn't want to consent to. There are a bunch of exceptions, if you will. A lot of them are religious, right? So if you're in the military, and one that keeps popping up is being a Seventh-day Adventist, right? So that is if that's your religion, if that's your faith, if that's your sect, what you follow, right? You can get a waiver for that, and you can possibly get out of some of this. But really, the waivers or the exceptions are few and far between. And again, they're mostly predicated upon religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate to say this, but when that situation was happening with COVID, there was a couple different instances with mandates with my children where we claimed religious exemption because I did not believe in having them partake in some of the things that were being mandated by the public schools and some of those things. So, but here's the thing, man. Let's kind of back up just a little bit, because I think you touched on something that's really interesting. Like, again, in the military, it's like, hey, man, it's an order. This is what, this is just how it is. I think that if the federal government could have taken that approach with the COVID situation and the general public, they would have. But unfortunately, that's not, that's not going to work in a democracy that claims freedom as its basis for existing. And a lot of people are like, whoa, wait a second. And then, Mike, we had all this reasoning that came behind. Does that happen in this situation as well with the military, where if somebody does kind of say, hey, you know what, I don't know about this, do they try to kind of use the same propaganda to say, yeah, but trust the science, and it's going to be great, and you have to do this, or you're going to die of this, or tell me, is there a connection there?
I'll say two things on that. One,
or is it just not needed, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I wondered, right?
Like, you've got to go take this. Hey, it's time for shots. The doctor's going to
just get in line, and
get in line. It's just like a piss test, right? Like, you wake up, it's 05:30. You're having a piss test today. I don't care what you did yesterday. You better get up and you start drinking water if you can't piss. Kind of. I mean, like, you're just told to do it. So when you're told that the corpsmen are going to be there at 0700 and you've got to line up for shots, you do it. Unless you have one of those religious exemptions or something like that, right? Yeah. So this was a big thing. I don't know if you remember in the second half of the 90s. Remember the anthrax letters, the white powder that were being sent to different places? Remember that?
Yeah, there was a huge anthrax scare. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in the late 90s,
they intercept one? They intercepted. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but didn't they intercept all those letters that was sent to the White House, like to the president or somebody at high level at that point? That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I keep going.
And one was sent to, I want to say it was the State Department, or it was of a federal building, not the White House necessarily. There was another one sent to a federal building in D.C. I don't remember the particulars, but there was another one as well. But what happened was, there was something called biothrax, and biothrax was created by Emergent Biosolutions, right? So I'm going to stick with the vaccine or the biothrax for the moment before we get into the company itself. So the DoD unilaterally forced the vaccine on service members, right?
So it was meant to protect you if you had an encounter with anthrax. It was meant to protect you from death, essentially, right?
Because anthrax was used all the way back in World War II as a biological weapon, right? So now people were crystallizing it, putting it into powder, right? And they were sending those letters. So the DOD feared that if you're overseas and you've got packages showing up at the gates and all this other kind of stuff, if they're filled with anthrax, kill a lot of people, right? It's a very effective, if you will, a biological weapon. So there was a case, and it is John Doe versus Rumsfeld, that the Department of Defense, they ruled that they could not administer the vaccine without consent, given the absence of a presidential waiver. So doing so violated 10 U.S. Code 1107, Presidential Executive Order 13139, and DOD Directive 6200.2, right? So what happened was a bunch of people, and I somewhat remember this, to be honest. I mean, I knew it was going on, but again, I got the shot, you take malaria pills wherever you go. You've heard me say that before.
Right.
Like, you just line up and you just do your thing, right? I mean, and a lot of people that have gotten that BioThrax shot talk about lumps, in their neck, for the left there for weeks. We had some comments talking about people who haven't been right ever since, and they're now in their 50s, right? And they got that shot, or now that they're in their 40s and they got that shot 20 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever the case might be, and they're still not right.
So what about you? I mean, you said you had it, right? Have you had any side effects?
I mean, you tell me. Don't
answer that. Don't answer that. Oh my God! I had just had an enlightenment. I know what happened. I know. I know what happened.
I mean, look at me. I don't even have. It hasn't affected the looks. It hasn't affected the looks, but it's probably affected some up here. But anyway,
I don't even have an excuse. Oh, it's so bad. And I was just curious, man. But in all honesty, not really though. You personally didn't see any.
No, I did not.
You were sick afterwards, or have any like weird lumps or anything.
No, I haven't.
That couldn't have maybe possibly been from other activities you were involved in.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Anyway,
so just so everybody knows, the DOD has a long-standing custom of mandating vaccines. If you're going overseas, if you're going somewhere, if you're going to a theater of operations, depending where that is, there's a lot of things. Remember the podcast we did with Brian White about the veterans issues? And and remember before we got on the camera, he talked about his wife was sick and they had to start ticking things off.
Yeah.
Because they're in Africa, right? And there's different diseases there than there are here, or there's still diseases there that are prevalent that have been eradicated in Western civilization, let's just say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a survival of the fittest thing in a lot of cases, right? I mean, bacteria, for example, we were exposed to it for generations. Obviously the strongest survive. People who are resistant to that bacteria reproduce. Boom, next thing you know, that bacteria basically becomes irrelevant, or, and obviously if you're exposed to something that you've not been in your generationally, family from a generational perspective hasn't been exposed to, it can be deadly, right? I mean, it could be lethal.
Yeah.
So anyway, keep going.
So I have a list of all of the medications or vaccines or what have you that are currently given to service members, right? Yeah, I mean, we can start with the anthrax because it's still there. Argentine hemorrhagic fever, botulism, Chikungunya fever, I don't even know what that is, diphtheria, Eastern equine encephalitis, hepatitis A and B, influenza, Japanese encephalitis, measles, meningococcal groups A, C, Y, and W135, mumps.
That's like strep, isn't it? Isn't that like some kind of strep? Yeah.
It could be pneumococcal, poliovirus types 1, 2, and 3, Q fever, rabies, Rift Valley fever, rubella, smallpox, tetanus, tularemia, typhoid fever, varicella, Venezuelan equine encephalitis. Maybe that's why all the people. Maybe that's why all the illegals are coming from Venezuela, because they're trying to escape equine encephalitis, or they're just coming from prison. That's a whole different topic.
That's horses. Is that horses? Horse encephalitis.
Western equine encephalitis and yellow fever. Now, there's
how many was that, by the way, roughly? How many was that?
2, 4, 6. That's 25.
Holy cow, man. Okay.
Right. So now there's of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of those are an investigational new drug. So the botulism, the Argentine hemorrhagic fever, Eastern equine encephalitis, Rift Valley fever, Q fever, tularemia, the Venezuelan one, a bunch of those are what's considered investigational new drugs, right? That means they haven't had FDA approval yet, but they've been approved to be provided in that setting, in the service member military setting,
and essentially an experimental setting. Like, I don't know, let's see what this thing does.
It's all obviously it's all about, I believe it is anyway. It's all about not, making sure that whatever nature has done or whatever man has done to create certain, viruses or fevers or whatever, right? That we're counteracting that in our service members, so that when somebody goes somewhere, they don't get deathly ill and have to come back in a bag or otherwise, right? So I get all of that. But there's also 2 vaccines that are given to all military personnel that are truly experimental right now, 2024, right now. You ready for this?
Okay.
I can't even pronounce them. Botulinum toxoid vaccine, and then tick-borne encephalitis vaccine. And there's the manufacturer of the first was Bioport Corporation. Manufacturer of the second is Baxter Immuno Variations or something like that. So there's right now there's 2 products, there's 2 vaccines out there that are completely experimental. They're not just investigative; they're completely experimental, and they're being given to military personnel.
And he said tick-borne encephalitis. Was that the second one?
Yep.
So, I mean, again, man, and so let's kind of tie this back, because I guess the thought that comes to mind is why, right? Why? Why? Yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, why? So let's talk about that. Why?
So is there? So the first answer could be that someone somewhere in a far off land at a duty station overseas contracted tick-borne encephalitis, right?
Mm-hmm.
I maybe that could be one reason, right? Or some people have, and the DoD said, hey, we got to get this under control. Nothing that we have in our medical arsenal, right, combats this thing. So we need to bid it out. We need to get someone to bid on it, get a pharmaceutical company to bid on it, and then try to create a vaccine. And now it's being administered in the experimental phase. So you and I have both read a lot about this leading up to this podcast. How many times did you see? How many times did you see the word guinea pigs? Right, it's all over the place. Like
all over the place,
all over the place, right?
Yeah, I thought of lab rats. Often.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I mean, I you think about that again from an experimental perspective. It's like we're trying stuff on animals. Okay, the animals, they handle the situation, whatever. Hey, let's try it on. Now we need a human. We need a human test subject or a group of human test subjects. How do we get people to agree to something that we really don't have any long-standing evidence of potential side effects or downfall, or you go, oh, well, hey, these guys, we can just order them to take it. They don't have a choice, guys and gals, I should say. Right. I mean, it's kind of an easy target, right? It's kind of like low-hanging fruit. I hate to say that, but it's kind of like how much easier does it get for them to use an experimental human test group than to be like, well, these guys, if we just sell them, again, guys and gals, if we just say, hey, you have to take it, then they're going to line up and take it.
Yeah,
we can see what happens.
So I made a comment earlier where the military, the DoD, has a long-standing history of doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So you hear all about the effects from Vietnam veterans about Agent Orange, right?
Yeah.
So what was in the napalm and all that, So hundreds of soldiers were subjected to hallucinogens and experimental programs conducted by the veterans at risk. The veterans at risk, the health effects of mustard gas and lewisite, I mean, that goes back to mustard gas in World War II, and it also pertains to the people who were impacted by napalm, Agent Orange in Vietnam, right? They say the goal of the experiments was to provide information that could help the U.S. military and intelligence efforts, And and most people agree that shouldn't be done. I mean, you've got all of the kind of the airborne illnesses from the Gulf War in the early 90s that a lot of people are suffering with. Guys that were still in the service when I went in. I went in a couple years after the Gulf War, and I was in with guys who had obviously been in before, through, and were still in when I was. I mean, guys would get sick for no reason. I mean, you get sick for no reason, but like serious and over again, just
really sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chronic.
Really
You would call it chronic illness.
Chronic, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, it's crazy to me that, and here again, in a lot of this, there's a great website that we shared with each other, right? Like that it's a .mil site, right? It's a .mil site. So it's a government site, and it talks about, I mean, you can read that the word guinea pigs several times, unwittingly participated in as human subjects in tests for drugs intended for mind control or behavior modification, often without their knowledge or consent, right? Like all of this is the government is admitting that they've done this, that they continue to do it, right? And
look, man, let's change the context of this, because I think this also makes a difference, right? Let's say that our government, or the large body of government in any country in the world, they chose a group of people to test these drugs, vaccines, mind altering, whatever, right? Dude, it would be like genocide.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like that. It's the fact that we, hey, it's military personnel. They signed up for this. This is what happens. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, it's taken, dude, the fact that it's acceptable in this particular context, and it would not be acceptable in so many other contexts on the planet, is what really gets my goat about it. Right. It's like, that's not okay. Why is it okay for this to be happening here if it wouldn't be okay for it to be happening to other humans in any other situation on the planet?
Where are all the human rights activists? Where are all the people screaming about, human test subjects and that it's wrong and it's, it's unfair? I mean,
they're talking about.
Is it because it's the military?
They're talking about how cows are the biggest carbon, offenders on the planet right now, instead of wondering about why these people are being utilized as test subjects. Again, man, it's like, what are we focused on?
Exactly.
Where are we spending our time and resources?
And so we're up on a break, but before we get to it, right? I wonder just myself, where do people that join the military, where do they typically come from? Right. So I'll answer. I'll answer for you. So they typically come from lower socioeconomic levels, right? Yes, you've got some people who go to college and they wanted to be in the military and they become officers and all that kind of good stuff, right? But for by and large, the average grunt, if you will, right? The average soldier, the average airman, the average sailor, the average Marine, right? The average coastie, right? They were, okay in high school, maybe. They didn't have many options after high school, either go to a trade or go to the military, or like some people we know behind this microphone right here, got in a bunch of trouble, right? And didn't have many ways out, and the military was one of them, right? So, I mean, so does that make people look at the military as lesser, lesser human beings, and you can do this kind of stuff to them because they weren't much to begin with, which, by the way, is total bullshit, because here I am. But right, like, does that give people the right to think that way?
I think, honestly, Mike, I think that was clear in the COVID situation as well. I think that where they pushed that vaccination and some of those items, you saw, I mean, I don't know. Again, I think there's ties to people's willingness to, quote unquote, be a guinea pig, or maybe their unwillingness to push back. Maybe that's a better way to say it, right? Based on the fact that they just don't feel like they have the authority or the right, or whatever that, that barrier is. That's completely false, I think, when we talk about this. I don't know. That's a really interesting. It's a really interesting question. So, let's take a break, man. You want to take a quick break, and then
let's dive back into it. Let's dive back into it, and particularly on the, the pharmaceutical side of things, how that kind of plays into it. And then let's tie this all back into COVID, because I think there's a significant tie there.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Cool. All right. We'll be right back.
We'll be back.
Okay. We're back after the break.
We're back. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good break. It's a little story.
Yeah, the break thing is kind of fun because like the podcast just stops and starts, but people don't understand like what we do in the meantime. They don't know that we left for like an hour and when paraded around. Yeah, I ate some food, maybe did some shopping. Anyway,
those stories about our friend Nick in the '80s, right?
Oh yeah, dude, that was such a good story.
So anyway,
I'm watching this.
He will. He's gonna get it. Yeah. Anyway,
short, so you can send him a short or something.
We should.
I'm gonna start using it now. See if we can get it off. Okay, so anyway, we stopped off. I had a question for you. And again, we're talking about the what we would consider to be somewhat experimental practices of vaccination shots, other things that has been taken out on military service members and has happened for a long time. And again, there's plenty of documentation that clearly shows that. And you read off earlier in the podcast a whole list of stuff that's now given to our service members. I had a question for you, and this just popped up in my mind. Is there do you see this more in any particular branch of the military versus another, or is it just like across the board? To explain that, did you know? I mean, have you seen
I don't know. I don't believe that any one service is different than another relative to the kinds of shots they have to take. I would imagine though, like does the Coast Guard have to take the same kind of shots, that guys that go to, Southeast Asia have to take? I don't know. I would say probably not. I think an interesting part of that is people who join the National Guard.
Okay.
Right. Like if you're joining and you're a reservist or you're going into the National Guard or whatever the case might be.
Yeah. You plan to be here in the United States. Is what you're saying. Like
but I mean,
planning to be deployed.
But we've seen in, Persian Gulf, we've seen Afghanistan, we've seen Iraq, we've seen, a while lately where a lot of reservist groups get called up. We just saw that 3 reservists out of Georgia got killed in that drone strike. That was a month or two ago, right? In Jordan. Right. So I have to imagine that if you're in the National Guard, if you're a reservist, what have you, and you get called up to go somewhere, you're going to have to take what that area of operations, that theater dictates, right? I have to imagine that. But I do have a question though, and maybe something we should look up is if the reserve. I know in boot camp, and I know in secondary school. So you go to boot camp, then you go to your secondary school. That's your MOS, whether you're a radio operator or a forward observer or a tank mechanic or whatever, right?
Right.
Reservists go to those same schools, right? They all go to the same schools. Just after that school, the active guy goes to his duty station in Okinawa or in the States or somewhere, and the reservist goes home. Right, goes home and gets a job, and then reports once a week, 1 week in a month, 3 weeks in summer. We've all heard that, right? So so those reservists who were sitting right next to me in boot camp and in those MOS schools got all the same shots I did. We were all in line together. So
it makes you wonder, right? So there is definitely, right? Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely it tells me that there's not prejudice or bias in the branch of military. It's just, hey, you're in, you take the shots, you get in line, you do your thing. And it seems like anyway. So anyway, it was just a random question.
Correct. Yeah. It
was a random question. And again, it kind of made me think about your socioeconomic point. You know what I mean? And but again, I think there's all walks of life and all branches of the military. I don't think that makes any difference. I was just curious if there was any segregation there between, groups or, so anyway, all right, well, let's keep going on the topic. So that was just kind of a side question.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, Emergent Biosolutions. So they created and administered the Biothrax, right? Which was right. And so that got cut off in that court case, John Doe versus Rumsfeld, all that kind of stuff. Right. So it's interesting. We talk a lot.
I'm waiting for this because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's not the only thing they've developed. But go ahead.
Oh no, of course not. But it's really, really interesting how these pharmaceutical companies always seem to find their way into huge profits when there's either testing or experiments or whatever, right? Experimental, courses of action. So,
right.
and political donations often tell the story, right? There's a great website. I want everybody to look at it. So we've talked for a while about, companies and individuals that are donating to certain super PACs and or candidates themselves. Well, both sides of the aisle, right? There's
Absolutely.
a great website. It's called opensecrets.org. I wish I knew about this website when we did the congressional episode, when we talked about,
Yes.
the stock trading, the inside stock trading, because and we might want to piggyback off of that episode and do another one now knowing that this opensecrets.org exists, right? But in any case, Emergent Biosolutions in 2012 spent $430K in donations to politicians, and spent in 2011 spent $3.2 million in lobbying. In 2013, $2.75 in lobbying. 2014, $440,000 in donations. 2015, $4.4 million in lobbying. In 2016, they spent $450K. In 2017, $2.7 million in lobbying. In 2008, $474K to political campaigns. 2009, you notice the even years of elections, they're donating to campaigns, and in the off years, they're spending money on lobbying. 2019, 3.7 in lobbying. It got up to, ready for this? Where did this happen? They spent their most in 2020 with almost $600,000 in campaign donations. And then in 2021, they spent the most with $5.18 million in lobbying. Right. Wow. So they're spending tons and tons of money. And the numbers 2023, wow. 2024, they're all there, but they're spending tons of money. Now, another thing that happened in 2020, when they were giving all of this money to political campaigns, and in 2021, when they spent over $5 million in lobbying, their stock a month and a half before the 2020 election was at $108 a share. I'm sorry, $114 a share. And in 2021, when they were doing all that lobbying, it hovered around $108 a share. Right? So guess what else came out? Guess what else they produced in that 2020, 2021 timeframe?
No idea.
Narcan.
Oh, yeah, which is has gotten huge.
Huge today. Huge. Well, it was huge. It was huge. I'm going to say last year and the year before, because that's when the fentanyl crisis really hit.
Yes, everybody was like, keep Narcan around so you could, right?
Yep. And
somebody had an adverse reaction. Yeah.
And again, their stock was doing well. It was around $85 a share in 2022, right? Right now, today, I just looked before we got on the podcast, it was at $3.35 a share. So they've lost a lot of money. But you can see, if you look at the charts, when they're donating a lot to campaigns and they have this new drug, Narcan, or I'm sure it was the same when Biothrax came out, their profits soar, their stock price goes up. There's always a change in leadership, always a change in company structure. Right. When that happens, the CEO says, hey, I'm retiring. Hey, good luck. And the next guy steps up, and then Narcan comes along. That guy steps down. Hey, I'm taking off. I'll see you later.
That could be misleading too, Mike, right? Because it could be a situation where they split up the company into multiple pieces, or I think that happens a lot where that's a huge variable or variance in the stock value. So, I feel like they could actually be worth more money but the stock price is way down to $3 and something a share just because of, all the M&A crap that happens and companies splitting up and dividing up and selling off portions of the company or whatever, right? Or maybe they sold the rights to one of those drugs to some other company and the stock price went, but they made hundreds of millions of dollars off of the development of the drug, right? It could be any of those things. So there's a lot. That's a very untold story. I think it's interesting. How do they get it?
But how do they get it? They donate a bunch of money to campaigns. They lobby their asses off. They are, going back to 2012, they are in the top 3% of dollars spent lobbying in this country.
Right.
So they're in the 7th percentile.
Here's what I think is interesting. We talked earlier about, how do these things come about? Oh, maybe a guy, that was stationed overseas got ticked, tick-borne encephalitis,
encephalitis,
and somebody goes, hey, we got to solve this problem. And so then how do they do that? You know what I mean? So these companies, these biomedical companies or these pharmaceutical companies are sought out by someone, right? Trying to create a solution to a problem. And then it's not just, hey, go develop this. It's, hey, we'll give you money, right, to do the research and development to solve this problem. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's, again, when we tie this back to the COVID situation, it wasn't like, hey, any researcher who can come up with the best, vaccine possibility or the best vaccination for humanity is going to get awarded all this money. No, it was, hey, let's give it to Pfizer, let's give it to Moderna, let's give it to these large giant companies. And again, I understand that, yes, maybe they have more resources. Does that mean that they're the most capable or have the best possible solution necessarily? I don't know that it does. But when people were shouting from the treetops about, well, they're this vaccine away for free, so there's no money involved. It's like the United States government had already given out $2 billion plus in research and development money to these companies to try to help solve the problem. So, I feel like that's the same thing with this Narcan situation potentially, right? It's like these guys are getting money on the front end before they've done anything because they're chosen one.
Well, how
that just gets money shoved in there.
So how are they? You said, how do they pick them? How do they choose them? I would think it goes out
lobbying.
It goes out for bid, but it's lobbying. If you're in the top,
it's lobbying.
Yes, if you're in the top 3% of lobbying, if you spend the top 3% of lobbying dollars in the United States, people are going to come your way.
You're going to get contracts.
Yes, you're going to get you're absolutely going to get contracts. and this entire company, when you look at the stock ticker, it has risen and fallen on these large drugs that are in response, anthrax, in response to the letters and the shit that was happening. This Narcan in response to
the fentanyl epidemic. Yep.
Right. So it's like they rise and fall off these lobbying dollars, and it's just politics. And what do lobbying dollars do? I was just going to bring that up. I was just going to ask you that question.
So go ahead. Where do they really go? Why do we spend $4.4 million in 1 year lobbying that? Where's the money go?
It's trips. It's conference. Well, it's their conferences.
Entertaining meetings.
Correct. Yeah, they're conferences that are in Hawaii, conferences that are in Peru, right? Like
where all expenses are paid, and maybe we play some golf, and we talk about how we're going to solve these problems together.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a conference with a 2-hour session in the morning of the first day, and then you leave 4 days later.
Right. This is one of those pieces, and we've kind of talked about this, this is one of those pieces of capitalism that I don't necessarily like, right? It's a true story that we live in a world where, you kind of, it's the, hey, you scratch my back, I scratch yours mentality, right? Hey, we continue to spend time together to get to know each other, to work on solutions for issues and problems that are out there in the world we live in or the industry we work in or whatever that situation is. Dude, I entertained clients, right? I took people out, we met, we played golf together, whatever, I'm sure you've been in that situation as well.
Yeah.
But when it gets to be this extravagant and it gets to be this level of dollars, it goes back to what we talked about with the COVID situation, man. Now all of a sudden it's transitioning from a healthcare issue to a political issue and a money issue. And now whose best interest is really at heart. Right.
So it's the politicians. So let's go back. Let's take it even a step further.
And the CEOs and the executives at these companies that are just making buku money off this stuff.
Because when they get these huge contracts, what's the first thing carved out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what am I going to pay myself? Right.
Right. And the other high level executives. And by the way, who are we going to offer stock options to and shares and availability
and on these conferences, do you think that there's not conversation like in 2019 when they spent $3.77 million in lobbying when the fentanyl crisis was starting to heat up? Do you think that Joe executive VP of VP of execution and development, I don't know, some bogus title, right, was not talking to Pelosi's cans about, hey, our stock's going to bump. our stock's going to bump. So your husband should probably use his shell to buy up some more of our stock because it's going to bump. And then you can sell it, but just hold on to it for 60 days and then sell it after 60 days.
I think what's interesting, man, it's like, you hear, I guarantee when you're inside of that circle, oh, hey, did you hear that so-and-so is flying to Hawaii with, this biomedical company or Halliburton I mean, it happens in every industry. It's not just the pharmaceutical people, right? I mean, this happens all over the place. And somebody goes, the people agreed to go on this excursion. They're obviously going to they got a good shot at getting awarded this monster contract. There's only probably 2, 3 of those companies. Maybe. You could bet on all 3 of them and still win. Even if you get, if one of them, only as long as one of them is going to be the one that all of a sudden jumps to the roof and goes from $3.35 a share to $108.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's it's like win, man.
It's like if both teams are playing the Super Bowl and they're both at like plus 600. You're going to win money no matter. So what are the long-term ramifications of some of this? So let's take it back to COVID-19, right? So a lot of people didn't get you didn't get the shot. You didn't want it. You didn't want to put that in your body. A lot of people didn't want to get it put in their body. Some service members didn't want to put in their body and they got taken out. But then remember, they were asked to come back afterward.
Yeah. Hey, sorry guys, we screwed.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way,
Yeah. By the way, can you come back? Because you were pretty good at your job, but you just, you didn't fall for it, right? Yeah. So have you heard about Florida recently and having a measles outbreak?
Dude, I did hear something about that. So your hypothesis is that they've created this fear.
Yeah. So earlier this week, right? Or now when we release this podcast, it'll be last week, right? So 2 adults aged 20 and 24 were diagnosed with measles. They got measles. Now it was travel related, right? But so remember Jenny McCarthy and was not going to get her kids vaxxed and all this other stuff years ago.
Smoke show. Didn't she have a child with autism? And she did a whole bunch of research and had talked to several people that said that there was a chance it was related to the metals and vaccinations or something, you know what I mean? And then she started to dive down, which is kind of the RFK has also pushed on that situation as well, right?
Right. So I mean, I don't know if you remember, but we did a podcast last year, and it was quite a while ago where we talked about the number of immunizations in the 60s or the 50s was 2. And then in the 60s, it was 7. And in the 70s and 80s, it jumped to 60 something. Right. So there, and I don't know. I don't know if she was right. I don't know if those people are right. I don't know if RFK is right. I don't know. I don't know if they're right or not. In those drugs, there's never been any proof otherwise. However, doctors will tell you and the establishment will tell you that there's no impact, toward autism or something like that. But now we've had COVID-19 and it's been forced down our throats, right? Mm-hmm. It was forced on us. People got kicked out of the service, like we've talked about. You couldn't get into restaurants, you couldn't travel, you couldn't go to Canada. Remember, we've talked about all of this. So now our parents really are they so gun shy as to what might the providers and or the government might be suggesting for their children relative to vaccines, stuff that we know works, like measles vaccines, right? Yeah. Polio, right? Are they gun shy enough now that they're putting their own children at risk for and some of these diseases that have all been eradicated here? Are they at risk in bringing it back because they were so taken advantage of during the COVID-19 pandemic or whatever situation might be, that now you have a whole population of people that won't get their kids vaccinated, and it's going to cause, I don't know, rubella, scarlet fever, measles, and all, whatever, all this shit that happened, centuries ago. Is that stuff going to come back because people are gun shy off of what the government did? Is that the real long lasting effect of Fauci and COVID-19?
Yeah, man, I was reading about, we've laughed a little bit about Mr. Pfizer, about the Travis Kelce thing and Taylor, that whole, and I actually read an article, dude, about that and about the sponsorship. I think it was $200 and some million he's gotten paid. And we can look this up and we can put a link in there as well if people want to see it. But I think it was around $200 million that Travis Kelce's gotten paid by Pfizer as a, representative of the company. And it was based solely on the fact that after the COVID-19 pandemic, the level of belief or trustworthiness in Pfizer as a pharmaceutical company was down to like 18% of the population trusted them as someone to provide a medical solution. So, they go out and they start selling, right? They start marketing. Hey, we're the good guys. Hey, at the same time, they're pushing additional drugs. Now like Paxlovid and those, hey, if it's COVID, Paxlovid, I told you, they've got all these rhyming, things that we talked about a little bit with the Fauci thing, dude. It's all sales and marketing. And it's like telling you, hey, this drug only works if you have a very mild case of symptoms. Well, why the fuck are you taking a drug if all you have is minor, mild, your thing's going to be gone in fucking 2 or 3 days anyway? Like, this is about the thing. This is what this all comes back to, Mike. To me, it's about the money. It's about this opportunity to, again, politicize, and this tie back between these privatized giant companies that are pushing around billions of dollars, hundreds of millions to billions of dollars back to the government. And it's like this big circle. And honestly, dude, it's literally like going down a fucking toilet bowl. It makes me sick. It's like these people don't care about the side effects or what's happening. They care that people buy it, that people take it, that they get these drugs approved by the FDA so they can sell them. And I think that's where this military stuff comes into play. It's like that gives them one more checkbox, right? To say, hey, we tested this on humans. Nobody died. Even if they did, they wouldn't tell you. Like, I don't know, man. It's again, we've seen this information get filtered out. We've seen side effects get filtered out. I don't trust it. I'm one of those people that doesn't trust the system because of all this stuff. No, and the forcefulness at which it's been driven at us.
And now we have 13 cases of measles in Florida in 2024. Right? Like, so I mean, I don't get it. Your question of when did it stop being about healthcare and when did it become political? I'll tell you when, because in 2020, Emergent Biosolutions spent over $5 million lobbying. That's when healthcare became political. And it was long before that, but that is a prime example.
And Mike, I also think it's a problem that when we talk about it being politicized, anytime now you have a situation where there's such a giant creation of dollars, a giant creation of monetary benefit, the politics are tied in there. They're when you start talking about hundreds of millions and billions of dollars and beyond, all of a sudden, man, there's the government is there. It's like the Big Brother situation. Like, again, we talk about policies, regulations, we talk about red tape. This is what becomes really difficult to me, Mike, is that we as individuals have seen this huge increase. Sorry, I got to stop banging on the table because my camera's shaking. But we as individuals have seen this giant increase in red tape and in regulations and difficulty to be an entrepreneur, run your own business or start your own business. These giant companies that can spend $5 million plus in lobbying, their red tape is going away, and we are literally going to get eaten alive by the machine. It's sad that we're losing our rights and our ability to function as individuals, but these huge corporations are the ones writing their own rule book. They're the ones grading their own papers. They're the ones working directly with the government to figure out what are these policies and these regulations going to look like. And here we are, man, like sitting quietly in the background, like, what's happening?
What's going on?
Hey, get in line, man. Get in line for this shot, right? So I don't know, man. It's just to me, it's kind of a scary situation, right?
It really is. It really is. We're about up on time, but what we promised to do is provide some of these websites when we publish this episode. So you guys can do your own research. We talk about that a lot. Check it out for yourself. And if you know somebody, if you know a veteran, or someone who's still active, right, who has something going on because of some of this, or has some treatment issues with the VA or whatever the case might be, let us know. I mean, I think we need to dive into this a little bit more, and more people need to understand, particularly parents out there listening to this podcast, and your son or daughter wants to join the military. I mean, that's one of the things you have to consider these days, right? I mean, information is so prevalent today that we can do that. We can plan for that. We can research that beforehand. But I mean, that has to be your decision-making process, right? So I'd like to, Mike,
Yeah, and I'd like to take that a step further, Mike. I think it's the same thing with anybody who was mandated to take, the COVID-19 vaccine, and anybody that, if you know somebody that had, some nasty side effects from the vaccination or the process, or same thing. I mean, this to me all kind of ties back to what we're talking about, which is this government overreach, right?
Yeah.
It's
we
the overreach, and
we can start with Gary Carter. We can start with Gary Kramer. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Gary Carter.
Gary Carter.
Yeah. Wasn't he a catcher?
He was the Mets. The Mets.
We actually were used to, that was a sexual position. We actually used that name. Did you ever know that? Ever tell you that story? The reverse Gary Carter. It's anyway.
Why am I not surprised?
I'm just saying it makes sense. Some people call it the reverse.
I guess no. We called it Nick in the '80s. I mean, that's what we called it. So anyway, all right. So hey, everyone! Thank you very much for listening, watching. WhyNotUsPod.org, Why Not Us 1776 on YouTube, and Why Not Us in all caps on Spotify.
Awesome, man. Hey, good stuff, dude. I appreciate you digging in and diving into this, and thank you for all the people that commented that kind of echoed back on
that led us to this
topic. Yeah, got us to dive into it, and that's exactly what we're hoping you guys continue to do is chime in. If you hear something we talk about that kind of sparks some interest, or somebody, or something, and you kind of go, hey. Speak up, say something about it. We want to continue to dive into the stuff that is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely, man. A great topic. I'm glad we talked about it. Good discussion, man. And I'll see you here in maybe 8 days, 9 days, something like that.
Yeah, next week I'm coming down. Yeah, a little spring break time, and let's see if I bring some more shitty weather when I come down there. So hopefully not this time.
All right, cool. All right, we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.
All right, thanks, guys.